In 2001, Nintendo consoles finally got their first tastes of Sonic the Hedgehog with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the GameCube and Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance. However, while Nintendo fans were getting new Sonic games, there was a huge part of Sonic's history that wasn't available to them. Luckily, the following year in 2002, Sega would release the Sonic Mega Collection, a compilation including many of Sonic's classic games on the Sega Genesis, like the original Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3. So many people who didn't grow up with Sega consoles finally got a chance to experience these games thanks to this amazing collection. But who cares about that? Today, we're gonna look at my sweet, precious Sonic Gems collection. Sonic Gems Collection was released on August 11th, 2005 for the Nintendo GameCube and the PlayStation 2 in Japan. It was later released in Europe and North America, but strangely, North America did not get the PS2 version of the game, just the GameCube version. 2005 was a strange year for the Sonic franchise. The popular Sonic X anime aired its last season, the Metarex Saga. Sonic got his first game on the Nintendo DS, the beloved title Sonic Rush. Oh, and there was another game that came out that year. Like I said, 2005 was strange for Sonic, and Sonic Gems Collection was just as weird. Sonic Gems Collection is a lot like Mega Collection in that it is a collection of old Sonic games. However, Gems Collection is the hipster younger brother of Mega Collection in that instead of having a bunch of super popular games that a ton of people already know and love, Gems Collection opted to re-release a bunch of hidden gems, games that went under the radar or weren't easily accessible for one reason or another. The three big games that headlined this collection were Sonic the Fighters, Sonic CD, and Sonic R. I really love the idea for this collection. So many times we've seen the same old games get re-released over and over again. This is a trend that has continued even to this day, and not even just with the Sonic franchise. So getting a bunch of more obscure games in one convenient place is awesome. I would love to see a Mario Gems collection with Mario Artist Paint Studio, Mario Clash, and Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. But enough of that, let's get back to Sonic Gems Collection. I've already talked about most of the games in Gems Collection actually in the video that I did about Sonic's awkward phase from 1994 to 1997. And I've already talked about Sonic CD plenty as well, so I'll just give a very brief rundown of the games and my thoughts on them. Sonic the Fighters is a Sonic arcade fighting game released back in 1996, and it holds the special honor of not only being the first Sonic fighting game, but it's also the very first 3D Sonic game. I would definitely pick up plenty of other fighting games before this one, but with its fun cast of characters, stretchy and expressive Looney Tunes-esque animations, and some interesting mechanics, Sonic the Fighters is a charming little game that you might get a kick out of if you're into Sonic or quirky fighting games. Also, side note, for some reason, this game has 8 Chaos Emeralds instead of the usual 7. I wonder what happened to that last one. Sonic the Hedgehog CD for the Sega CD is a platformer not unlike the classic Sonic games on the Genesis, although this game has a time travel gimmick. Each stage has a past, present, bad future, and good future version. By either destroying these generators in the past or by collecting all 7 time stones, you can turn the bad futures caused by Eggman into good futures. The level design can be a bit questionable at times. It's more open-ended than even Sonic 3 and Knuckles' levels, but Sonic CD is still worth checking out thanks to its incredible style and what I consider to be the best soundtrack in the entire franchise. Sonic R is a game that exists. Actually, Sonic R is a racing game released for the Sega Saturn. It has a great soundtrack, one of my personal favorites in the franchise, and visually I have a soft spot for low-poly Sonic, but the biggest issue with Sonic R is the gameplay. The game is completely dry of content, with only 5 stages to race on, and the controls are horrendous. I remember when I took a look back at this game for the Sonic's Awkward Phase video, I said that you get used to the controls, and you do. The controls really aren't a huge problem if you're just playing the game casually. But if you want your playthrough to last more than half an hour or you want to unlock the secret characters, Sonic R's problems start to take their toll. Sonic R, because it has so few stages, opted to fill the stages with secrets to make them more interesting, like the Sonic tokens and the Chaos Emeralds. The problem is that the controls are so stiff that it's hard to reach these hidden areas, and sometimes it's even difficult to just pick these things up. Now, collecting these secret items wouldn't be so hard, except for the fact that you need to collect all 5 of the Sonic tokens in one race for it to count, and you need to at least come in 3rd place. The Chaos Emeralds are even worse because you have to come in 1st place for those to count. They even troll you after the race is over if you get the Chaos Emerald but you don't come in 1st. Getting all 7 Chaos Emeralds unlocks Super Sonic, easily the best character in the game with all-around absurd stats. Crazy speed, good handling, he's a monster. You also get a slightly different end credit scene when you beat the last stage of the game, Radiant Emerald, as Super Sonic. Instead of showing regular Sonic, you get Super Sonic. Speaking of Super Sonic, one cool thing that I will give Sonic R is that if you play as Super Sonic on Radiant Emerald, the game will play the game's theme song, Super Sonic Racing, instead of the stage's normal song, Diamond in the Sky. Personally, I much prefer Diamond in the Sky, but it is a cool little secret. Speaking of secrets, the game's secret characters are a bit strange. You've got Metal Sonic from Sonic CD, and the Egg Robo from Sonic & Knuckles, which makes sense, but then you've also got the brand new characters Metal Knuckles, which I guess is Knuckles' equivalent of Metal Sonic, and the very unnerving Tails doll. This creepy looking stuffed animal thing that looks like Tails. These characters first appeared in this game, and they very rarely appeared elsewhere. Dang, I just realized I said I was gonna briefly go over each game, and here I am rambling about Sonic R. What can I say? I realized I didn't really go in depth when I talked about Sonic R in my Sonic's Awkward Phase video series, so I figured I'd give more of my thoughts here. Long story short, Sonic R is a very, very flawed game with an amazing soundtrack and a great premise that I'd love to see the series take another crack at. But now that I've talked about the 3 headliners, I guess I should bring up the bonus games that Jim's collection has. This time I will be brief, I promise. We have 6 games for Sega's portable console, the Sega Game Gear. First up is Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which actually predates the Genesis version of Sonic 2. Despite being called Sonic 2, it has a completely original roster of levels that aren't in the Genesis version. Next is Sonic Spinball, and yeah, it's an 8-bit portable version of the Sonic pinball game on the Genesis. Next is Sonic Triple Trouble, aka Sonic and Tails 2 in Japan. Strangely, this collection opted not to include Sonic Chaos, which is the first game in the Sonic and Tails series. Triple Trouble is a platformer similar to the other games in the classic series. Next up is Sonic Drift 2, a racing game not unlike the old Mario Karts. Next is Tails' Sky Patrol, a unique little side-scroller shooter game where Tails is the protagonist. Tails starred in another game in this collection, a slower-paced platformer called Tails Adventures. These Game Gear games are solid at best and forgettable at worst, so you may find at least one game here that you vibe with. Also, like the 3 headliner games, a lot of these Game Gear games weren't super accessible back in 2005. Some of them actually did get re-released as bonuses in Sonic Adventure DX, but besides that, the only way you were playing a lot of these games officially is by going out and getting a Game Gear. Now, 9 games are cool, but what if I told you that there are some secret games in this collection? Why don't you go ahead and guess what games were included as secrets? Maybe Sega Sonic the Hedgehog? Oh, maybe Knuckles Chaotix? Oh, maybe some of the Master System Vector Man. I don't know who on the development team was a Vector Man fanboy, but for some reason they included a random Genesis game along with its sequel Vector Man 2 in this collection. What's even more interesting is that the Japanese version of Jim's collection has even more games with no relation to Sonic. The Japanese version got Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3, as well as Bonanza Bros. I don't know why these games were cut, but it's unfortunate that they were not included in the North American and European versions. Speaking of cut games, if you use an action replay to see some of the game's hidden content, apparently there were plans to include a few more games in the collection, including Sonic Eraser, a downloadable Genesis game for the Japanese Sega Game Toshokan service, aka the Sega Game Library, which lets you download games to play on your Genesis. Flicky was actually another Sonic-related game that was available on the service. Sonic Eraser has never been re-released to my knowledge, so it would have been really cool to get this game on here. Some of the other games that are referenced in Gems Collection's hidden content include Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair, Wonder Boy and Monster World, and Monster World 4 from the Wonder Boy platformer series published by Sega. Apparently, there were plans to also include one of the games I mentioned earlier, Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, an arcade game that used a trackball to control the characters. But because emulating the trackball was difficult, they didn't end up adding the game into the collection. Sega Sonic the Hedgehog was the debut of Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel, two previously forgotten Sonic characters that came back in Sonic Mania's DLC called Sonic Mania Plus. Another game that wasn't included but may have been considered for the collection is Knuckles Chaotix. In the museum mode of Sonic Gems Collection, there's a whole section dedicated to Knuckles Chaotix, despite it not being playable. It really sucks that Knuckles Chaotix wasn't included, as there's basically no official way to play this game without owning a Sega 32X. Speaking of the museum, one of the best parts about this game is the museum that has tons of pictures of artwork from each of the respective games. The museum also features screenshots from some of the more recent games, as well as artwork from Sonic the Screensaver, a program that Sega released in 1996, which is one big collection of Sonic artwork to use as screensavers for your computer. Nowadays, this museum really isn't anything special. You can easily find a lot of these images, but back in 2005, especially if you didn't have a reliable internet connection, this may have been your only way to see a lot of this cool art. There are some deep cuts too, like pictures of Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car and Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop. There are even a few things that I didn't know about before, like the keychain dispensing arcade game Sonic Space Tours, and also Project Sonic, which was a promotional event that Sega did to increase brand awareness for Sonic in Japan throughout the Sega Saturn era. You can see the Project Sonic logo on a lot of things during this era, like on the back of the Japanese box arts for the Sonic games on the Saturn, in the Sega Saturn magazine, and on these jars of Sonic Jam, like the actual jam you put on toast. Even though I've talked about a lot of this stuff in the past, I guess I just never paid attention to the Project Sonic logo. Funnily enough, Sega actually brought back Project Sonic to promote the brand in 2022, the same year that we got Sonic Origins, Sonic Frontiers, and the Sonic 2 movie. Gems Collection even has a little slideshow mode so you can sit back and enjoy pictures of Sonic jamming out at a Christmas concert, or chatting with Tails over some weird 90s video phone thing, or falling to his death while playing a Sega Saturn that's not even hooked up to a TV. One other thing about the slideshow mode is that for some reason, the slideshow skips over new images that you haven't viewed yet. So if you want all of the pictures you've unlocked to show up in the slideshow mode, you'll have to individually go through and view each one labeled new first. My favorite part of the museum is that you can even change the music that's playing. There are a lot of really cool remixes of classic Sonic songs that you can unlock, like a drum and bass remix of Sonic Boom, a vocal remix of Aurora Icefield from Sonic the Fighters, and an acid remix of Can You Feel the Sunshine. People love to talk about Mega Collection's music, but y'all gotta show some respect to Gems Collection because it has some bangers. Vibing with some cool music while you look at cool artwork is pretty awesome. You do have to unlock all of these pictures, which I'm torn on. I do think it's cool to give players something to work towards, but some of these unlock requirements are just weird. Like, to get this lovely picture of Sonic's girlfriend Madonna, you have to watch the end credits for Sonic Gems Collection 10 times. Why? For a lot of these images, you just have to do trial and error until you figure out how to unlock it. Like, all of these Sonic Adventure 2 images require that you play Sonic Triple Trouble for a certain amount of time, or to start up the game a certain amount of times. They do give these little hints at the bottom of the screen to help you out, but the hint doesn't even tell you that you have to play Sonic Triple Trouble to get these. Speaking of having to play the game a certain amount of times, I think the requirements like these are dumb. Like, playing the game for 2 hours, I get that. It encourages you to actually play the games. But having to start up the game 20 times? What's the point of that? All that encourages you to do is to start up the game, instantly leave, start the game up again, leave, and repeat until you get past the unlock threshold. Sometimes hints are helpful, like how this hint tells you to choose panels from the top of Chaotix's logo. You actually have to go to the Chaotix section of the museum, look at the image titled Chaotix logo, which is a simplified image of the Japanese box art for the Knuckles Chaotix game, and view the images of the characters in the museum in the order that they're shown on the box art for Chaotix. First is Charmy, then Vector, then Mighty, then Knuckles, then Espio. For doing that, you unlock this image of Metal Sonic from Knuckles Chaotix. I don't know, I think this is pretty neat. There's another one where the hint tells you to choose panels in the order of CPU characters in Sonic the Fighters. You actually have to go to the Sonic the Fighters page of the museum and select the pictures of the fighters in the correct order that you fight them in the arcade mode of the game. By doing so, you unlock this picture of Metal Sonic. I actually think that's pretty cool. It's like a little bit of trivia to unlock more pieces of artwork. It's at least more engaging than repeatedly starting games or watching credits over and over again. The big stain on this museum is that I can't unlock the last picture from the Sonic CD portion of the gallery, because whenever I beat the game during the ending cutscene, my game just stops working. Maybe it's my Nintendo Wii's disk drive, maybe it's the game disc itself, I don't know, it just hurts not being able to complete this museum. Man, now I'm feeling sad. Ooh, how about we look at some manuals? Manuals aren't exactly the most glamorous thing to include in a collection, but I honestly found a lot of the old manuals from the 90s to be really cool. Back in those days, games often didn't have a ton of story, and they usually didn't give you a robust tutorial either, so manuals typically had a good amount of background information about the game's narrative and details about the game's mechanics. Sometimes those details were blatantly wrong, like infamously Sonic CD's American manual called Amy Rose Princess Sally from the Sonic comics and the SatAM cartoon. I love how in the Sonic CD manual they call all of Sonic's moves super. The super spin attack, the super peel out, the super spin dash, heck, even the super grip. You know, Sonic's iconic move when he grabs a pole for dear life. Let's move on to the Sonic R manual. For both the Sonic CD and Sonic R manuals, they actually included two versions of the manuals: the original releases of the games and the PC releases. The reason for this is likely because the versions of Sonic CD and Sonic R that were included in the Gems collection are actually not the original versions, they're the PC versions. You can tell because the cutscenes in Sonic CD are much higher resolution than the original Sega CD release. For Sonic R, the PC version has some upgrades that weren't in the original Saturn version, like better 3D models, fixing the low draw distance of the Saturn version, and a higher frame rate. The most interesting new additions are weather effects. Sometimes it might be raining or snowing. When it's snowing, it even causes the water in the maps to freeze, allowing you to walk on it. I've heard that another one of the changes that they made was that they made the controls better for the PC version of Sonic R, and if they did, they could have done better. But anyways, let's get back to the manuals. Actually, I think I've said all I really wanted to say about the manuals. They're a nice little addition to Gems collection. I absolutely adore the music that plays while you're looking at the manuals. It's so chill and calming. I really could go on and on about this collection. I haven't even talked about the game's box art. The cover features Sonic and Metal Sonic. I did think this was kinda weird, but then I realized all three of the headliner games feature Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic hasn't really gotten much to do since Sonic Adventure came out. He came back in a big way in Sonic Heroes, but outside of that, he's mostly been relegated to a spin-off character with the occasional appearance in a main game to milk out some nostalgia points. I love how the North American box art says only for GameCube. Like, yeah, it's only for GameCube because you guys didn't bother releasing it on anything else in North America. The back of the box art is pretty neat. They highlight the 9 games in the collection that are immediately available, yet they never even mention that there are unlockable games. They had to make sure you didn't get spoiled that Vector Man was in here. Gems collection actually has a few unlockable demos of other Sonic games like the classic Genesis games that you can play. They put you in different scenarios like at the final boss of Sonic 1 and stuff like that. However, for some reason, they wouldn't unlock for me, so I don't really have a lot to say there. There's also a few unlockable movies. One is just the opening for Sonic Adventure, another one is a trailer for Sonic Heroes, and the last one is a video that gives a rundown of Sonic's history set to some energetic music. So yeah, this game has a few little neat secret extras. Sonic Gems Collection is just this quirky collection of more obscure Sonic games that I adore. What I love about Gems Collection is that it's a collection for the real Sonic nerds out there. You know, the kind of people who browse Sonic Retro or look up the cutting room floor pages for cut content from games, or the kind of people who watch videos like this. I think Mega Collection is still the better collection. The quality of games that you get in there is considerably better, but there's something about Gems Collection that just resonates with me. A bunch of weird, quirky, misfit games all in one place. Like I mentioned near the beginning of this video, a collection of a bunch of obscure and forgotten games like this just isn't a thing that I see happen often, especially for popular series that can easily just milk the same 4 or 5 classic games over and over again. I would love it if Sega gave us a Sonic Gems Collection 2. And considering the franchise is nearly 20 years older than when Sonic Gems Collection 1 came out, there's so many more games we can pick from. I can already see the lineup now. The 3 main games will be Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, Knuckles Chaotix, and Sonic Shuffle. The 6 bonus games will be Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, Sonic Chronicles, Sonic Pocket Adventure, Sonic Pinball Party, and you know what, screw it, just throw in Sonic Schoolhouse. Sega, please. The culture needs it. But hey, even if there's never a sequel, I'll always love the original Sonic Gems Collection. Thanks for watching, y'all, and have a great rest of your day.